Welcome back. I am Pemberton, and this is part 50 of Herodotus' Histories, the Great Land Battle. The night Withdrawal falls apart in the dark. By dawn the Greek army is scattered in 3 pieces, and Mardonius, thinking they are running, flings his whole host across the river after them. So the battle of Plataea is joined almost by accident, and the Spartans, hemmed in and waiting on their sacrifices, at last charge, break the Persian line, and kill Mardonius himself. The Persians flee to the great wooden stockade they have built to the Greeks storm it, and the army that Xerxes left to conquer Greece is destroyed almost to a man. Let us go on.
As for Amynpharidos, at first he did not believe that Pausanias would ever dare to leave him and his men behind, and he insisted that they should stay where they were and not leave their post. But when Pausanias and his troops were well ahead, Amynpharidos realized that they had in fact left him behind. He then made his division take up their arms, and led them slowly toward the main body. The main body, after it had gone about 10 furlongs, halted and waited for the division of Amynpharidos at the river Malois and a place called Argiopion, where there also stands a temple of the Eleusinian Demeter. It waited there for this reason. If Amynpharidos and his division did not leave the place where they had been posted, but remained there, the main body would be able to come back to their assistance. So Amynpharidos and his men were coming up to join them. At the same time, the cavalry of the barbarians was beginning to attack them in full force. The horsemen did on this day what they had been accustomed to doing every day. Seeing the place where the Hellenes had been posted on the former days now empty, they kept riding their horses farther on, and as soon as they came up with the Hellenes they began to attack them. Sons of Aluas, will you still say anything now that you see these places deserted? You who live near them used to say that the Lacedaemonians did not flee from battle, but were men unsurpassed in war. Yet you saw these men before this changing from their post, and now all of us see that they ran away during the night just past. When the time came for them to contend in battle with those who are truly the best of all men, they showed clearly that after all they are worthless men, who had been making a display of courage among Hellenes, a worthless race. As for you, since you had no experience of the Persians, I for my part was quite ready to excuse you when you praised these men, of whom after all you knew something good. But I wondered much more at Artabazos, that he should have been afraid of the Lacedaemonians, and that in his fear he should have uttered that most cowardly opinion, that we ought to move the army away and go to the city of the Thebans to be besieged there. The king shall yet be informed by me about that opinion. We will speak of these things elsewhere. Now, however, we must not allow them to act in this way. We must pursue them until they are caught and pay the penalty to us for all they did to the Persians in times past. After speaking in this way, Mardonius led the Persians at a run across the Asopos on the track of the Hellenes, supposing that they were running away from him. He directed his attack only against the Lacedaemonians and Tegeans, for he did not see the Athenians whose march was toward the plain because of the hills. Then the rest of the commanders of the barbarian divisions, seeing that the Persians had started in pursuit of the Hellenes, immediately all raised the signals for battle and began to pursue, each as fast as he could, without being arranged in any order or proper succession of posts. These men, then, came on with shouting and in confused numbers, thinking they would quickly make an end of the Hellenes. When the cavalry began to attack, Pausanias sent a horseman to the Athenians with a message. Athenians, now that the greatest contest is set before us, the one whose issue is the freedom or slavery of Hellas, we Lacedaemonians and you Athenians have been deserted by our allies, since they ran away during the past night. Therefore it has now been determined what we must do. We must defend ourselves and protect one another as best we can. If the cavalry had set out to attack you first, we and the Tegeans, who with us refused to betray the cause of Hellas, would have been bound to come to your aid. But as it is, since the whole body has come against us, it is right that you come to the part of the army that is hardest pressed and give aid. If, however, something has happened to you that makes it impossible for you to come to our help, then do us the kindness of sending us the archers. We know that in the course of this present war you have been by far the most zealous of all, and so you will listen to our request in this matter too. When the Athenians heard this, they wished to come to the aid of the Lacedaemonians and assist them as much as possible. But as they were already on their way, they were attacked by those Hellenes on the king's side who had been ranged opposite them. Thus they could no longer come to the help of the Lacedaemonians, because the force attacking them caused them great trouble. So the Lacedaemonians and Tegeans were left alone. Including their light-armed men, the Lacedaemonians numbered 50,000, and the Tegeans 3,000, for the Tegeans had not been separated at all from the Lacedaemonians. They began to offer sacrifice, intending to engage Mardonius and the force that had come against them. But their offerings did not prove favorable, and during this time many of them were being killed and many more wounded, for the Persians had made a palisade of their wicker shields, and were shooting arrows in great numbers without sparing. Pausanias, seeing that the Spartans were hard-pressed, and that the offerings were not favorable, fixed his gaze on the temple of Hera of the Plataeans, and called upon the goddess to help, praying that they might in no way be cheated of their hope. While he was still calling upon her in this way, the Tegeans started forward before the others and advanced against the barbarians. Immediately after the prayer of Pausanias, the offerings proved favorable for the Lacedaemonians as they sacrificed. When at last this happened, they too advanced against the Persians, and the Persians put away their bows and came against them. First there was fighting around the wicker shields, and when these had been overturned, the fighting became fierce beside the temple of Demeter and continued for a long time, until at last they came to close struggle. The barbarians would seize the spears and break them off. In courage and strength the Persians were not inferior to their opponents, but they were without defensive armor. Moreover, they were untrained in this kind of warfare and unequal to their enemies in skill. They would dart out one at a time, or in groups of about 10 together, some more and some fewer, and fall upon the Spartans and perish. In the place where Mardonius himself was, riding on a white horse, and with about him the 1,000 best Persians chosen out from the rest, there they pressed their opponents most of all. As long as Mardonius survived, they held out against the Lacedaemonians, defended themselves, and struck down many of them. But when Mardonius was slain, and the men ranked around his person, the strongest part of the whole army, had fallen, then the others also turned and gave way before the Lacedaemonians. Their clothing, without defensive armor, was a very great cause of destruction to them, since they were truly fighting light-armed against hoplites. Then satisfaction for the murder of Leonidas was paid by Mardonius according to the oracle given to the Spartans, and the most famous victory of all those known to us was gained by Pausanias the son of Cleombrotus, the son of Anaxandrides. The names of his ancestors above this have been given for Leonidas, since, as it happens, they are the same for both. Mardonius was slain by Eremnestos, a man of consideration in Sparta, who later, after the Median Wars were over, fought with 300 men against the whole army of the Messenians, then at war with the Lacedaemonians at Sthenocleros. There both he and the 300 were slain. When the Persians were turned to flight at Plataea by the Lacedaemonians, they fled in disorder to their own camp and to the palisade they had made in the Theban territory. It is a marvel to me that, although they fought beside the sacred grove of Demeter, not one Persian was found to have entered the enclosure or to have been killed inside it. Instead, most of the slain fell around the temple on unconsecrated ground. I suppose, if one should suppose anything about divine matters, that the goddess herself refused to receive them because they had set fire to the temple, that is, the palace at Eleusis. Thus far, then, the battle had proceeded. But Artabazos the son of Pharnax had been displeased from the very beginning because Mardonius had remained behind after the king departed. Afterward he had continually objected and done nothing, always urging them not to fight a battle. Since he was not pleased with the things Mardonius was doing, he acted for himself as follows. The men whom Artabazos commanded were no small force, but numbered as many as 40,000. When the fighting began, knowing well what the outcome of the battle would be, he led them carefully, after first ordering them all to go by the way he led them, and at the same pace at which they saw him go. After giving these orders, he led his troops on the pretense of taking them into battle. But when he was well on his way, he saw the Persians already taking flight. Then he no longer led his men in the same order as before, but set off at a run, fleeing by the quickest way not to the palisade and not to the wall of the Thebans, but toward Phocis, wishing to reach the Hellespont as quickly as possible. These men, then, were directing their march in this way. Meanwhile, while the other Hellenes on the king's side were purposely slack in the fight, the Boeotians fought with the Athenians for a long time. The Thebans who took the side of the Medes showed no small zeal for the cause, and they fought without slackening, so that 300 of them, the first and best of all, fell there by the hands of the Athenians. When these also turned to flight, they fled to Thebes, not to the same place as the Persians. The main body of the other allies fled without having fought steadily with anyone or displayed any deeds of courage. This is additional proof to me that all the fortunes of the barbarians depended upon the Persians, namely that at that time these men fled before they had even engaged the enemy, because they saw the Persians doing so. Thus all were in flight, except only the cavalry, including the Boeotian cavalry. This cavalry rendered service to the fugitives by constantly keeping close to the enemy and separating the fugitives of their own side from the Hellenes. The victors were then coming after the troops of Xerxes, pursuing them and slaughtering them. During the time when this panic arose, the report was brought to the other Hellenes, who had posted themselves around the temple of Hera and had been absent from the battle, that a battle had taken place and that the troops of Pausanias were gaining the victory. When they heard this, the Corinthians and those near them, without arranging themselves in any order, turned to go by the skirts of the mountain and the low hills along the road that led straight up to the temple of Demeter. The Megarians, Phliasians, and those near them went by the plain along the smoothest route. But when the Megarians and Phliasians came near the enemy, the cavalry of the Thebans saw them from a distance hurrying along without any order and rode up to attack them, with Asapoteros the son of Timander commanding the cavalry. Falling upon them, they killed 600 of them and pursued the rest and drove them to Kitaron. These men then perished ingloriously in this way. Meanwhile, the Persians and the rest of the throng, having fled for refuge to the palisade, succeeded in reaching the towers before the Lacedaemonians arrived. Once they had got up there, they strengthened the defensive wall as best they could. When the Lacedaemonians came up to attack it, a vigorous fight for the wall began between them. As long as the Athenians were absent, the Persians defended themselves and had a great advantage over the Lacedaemonians, since the Lacedaemonians did not understand the art of fighting against walls. But when the Athenians came to help them, then there was a fierce struggle for the wall, lasting a long time. At last, by courage and endurance, the Athenians mounted the wall and made a breach in it, and through this the Hellenes poured in. The Tegeans were the first to enter the wall. They were the ones who plundered the tent of Mardonius, taking, besides the other things in it, the manger of his horse, which was entirely of bronze and worth seeing. This manger of Mardonius was dedicated by the Tegeans as an offering in the temple of Athena, but all the other things they brought to the common stock of the Hellenes. After the wall had been captured, the barbarians no longer formed themselves into any close body, nor did any of them think of resisting. They were utterly at a loss, as one might expect from men in a panic, with many tens of thousands shut up together in a small space. The Hellenes were able to slaughter them so completely that, out of an army of 300,000, if the 40,000 whom Artabazos took with him in flight are subtracted, not even 3,000 of the remainder survived. Of the Lacedaemonians from Sparta, 91 in all were killed in the battle, of the Tegeans, 16, and of the Athenians, 52. Among the barbarians, the best men proved to be the Persians among the infantry and the Sacans among the cavalry. As a single man, Mardonius is said to have been the best. Among the Hellenes, although both the Tegeans and the Athenians proved themselves good men, the Lacedaemonians surpassed them in valor. I have no other proof of this, since all these defeated those placed opposite them, except that the Lacedaemonians fought against the strongest part of the enemy's force and overcame it. In my opinion, the man who proved himself by far the best was Aristodemos, the man who had returned safely from Thermopylae, as the only survivor of the 300, and had reproach and dishonor attached to him. After him the best were Posidonios, Philocteon, and Amompharitos the Spartan. However, when there came to be discussion about which of them had proved himself best, the Spartans who were present gave it as their opinion that Aristodemos had plainly wished to be killed because of the charge lying against him, and therefore, as if in a frenzy and leaving his place in the ranks, had displayed great deeds. Posidonios, they said, had proved himself a good man even though he did not wish to be killed, and in this respect he was the better man of the two. They may perhaps have said this from ill will. All those whose names I have mentioned among the men killed in this battle were specially honored, except Aristodemos. Because Aristodemos wished to be killed on account of the charge mentioned before, he was not honored. These men gained the greatest renown among those who fought at Plataea. As for Callicrates, the most beautiful man who came to the camp, not only of the Lacedaemonians but also of all the Hellenes of his time, he was not killed in the battle itself. Rather, while Pausanias was offering sacrifice, Callicrates was wounded in the side by an arrow as he sat in his place in the ranks. While the others were fighting, he was carried out of the ranks and died a lingering death. He said to Erimnestos, a Plataean, that it did not grieve him to die for Hellas. What grieved him was only that he had not proved the strength of his hand, and that no deed of valor had been displayed by him worthy of the spirit within him to perform great deeds. Of the Athenians, the man said to have gained most glory was Sophanes the son of Eutychides, of the deme Decolea. The inhabitants of this deme, as the Athenians themselves report, formerly did a deed that was of service to them for all time. Long ago, when the sons of Tyndarus invaded the Attic land with a great host to bring Helen home, and were laying waste the demes because they did not know to what hiding place Helen had been taken, the men of Decolea, or as some say Deicolus himself, were angered by the insolence of Theseus and feared for the whole land of the Athenians. They therefore told the sons of Tyndarus the whole matter, and led them to Aphidnae, which Teutochos, sprung from the soil, betrayed and delivered up to the sons of Tyndarus. Because of this deed, the Decolaeans have always had freedom from dues in Sparta and front seats at the games, privileges that still exist to this day. So much was this the case that even in the war that arose many years after these events between the Athenians and the Peloponnesians, when the Lacedaemonians laid waste all the rest of Attica, they refrained from harming Decolea. Sophanes belonged to this deme, and he showed himself the best of all the Athenians in this battle. Two different stories are told about him. One says that he carried an iron anchor bound by bronze chains to the belt of his corslet. Whenever he came up with the enemy, he would throw it, so that, they say, when the enemy came out from their ranks they would not be able to move him from his place. When his opponents fled, his plan was first to pick up the anchor and then pursue them. This is how that story is reported. The other story, disputing the truth of the one just told, is reported as follows, that on his shield, which was always moving about and never remained still, he bore an anchor as a device, and not an iron anchor bound to his corslet. Another illustrious deed was also done by Sophanes. When the Athenians besieged Aegina, he challenged Eurybates the Argive, a man who had been victor in the 5 contests at the games, fought him and killed him. After these events, Sophanes himself, when he was general of the Athenians together with Ligros the son of Glaucon, was slain by the Edonians at Daton, after proving himself a good man while fighting for the gold mines. When the barbarians had been laid low by the Hellenes at Plataea, a woman came over to them of her own free will from the enemy. She was the concubine of Herodotus the son of Thespes, a Persian. When she saw that the Persians had been destroyed, and that the Hellenes were victorious, she descended from her carriage and came up to the Lacedaemonians while they were still engaged in the slaughter. This woman had adorned herself with many ornaments of gold, and her attendants had done the same. She had also put on the finest robe she possessed. When she saw that Pausanias was directing everything there, she recognized him, being already well acquainted with his name and lineage because she had often heard them. Taking hold of his knees, she spoke to him. O king of Sparta, deliver me, your suppliant, from the slavery of captivity. You have already done me service by destroying these men, who have regard neither for demigods nor for gods. I am by race from Kos, the daughter of Herodotus the son of Antigoras. The Persian took me by force in Kos and kept me a prisoner. Woman, be of good courage, both because you are a suppliant, and also if in addition to this you are speaking the truth and are the daughter of Herodotus the Cone, who is bound to me as a guest, friend more than any other man who lives in those parts. After saying this, Pausanias for the time being gave her in charge to the ephors who were present, and afterwards sent her away to Aegina, where she herself wished to go. Immediately after the arrival of the woman, the Mantineans arrived, when everything was already over. Learning that they had come too late for the battle, they were greatly grieved and said that they deserved to be punished. Being informed that the Medes with Artabazos were in flight, they pursued them as far as Thessaly, though the Lacedaemonians tried to prevent them from pursuing fugitives. Then they returned to their own country, and sent the leaders of their army into exile from the land. After the Mantineans came the Eleans. They, like the Mantineans, were greatly grieved by what had happened and so departed home, and these also, when they returned, sent their leaders into exile. So much for the Mantineans and Eleans. At Plataea, among the troops of the Aeginetans, was Lampon the son of Pythias, one of the leading men of the Aeginetans. He was moved to go to Pausanias with a most impious proposal, and when he came in haste, he spoke. Son of Cleombrotus, you have done a deed of marvelous greatness and glory, and God has permitted you, by rescuing Hellas, to lay up for yourself the greatest renown of all the Hellenes known to us. Now therefore perform also what remains to be done after these things, so that still greater reputation may attach to you, and so that in future every one of the barbarians may beware of being the first to commit presumptuous deeds against the Hellenes. When Leonidas was slain at Thermopylae, Mardonius and Xerxes cut off his head and crucified him. Therefore repay him like with like, and you will have praise first from all the Spartans and then also from the other Hellenes. If you impale the body of Mardonius, you will then have taken vengeance for Leonidas, your father's brother. Stranger of Aegina, I admire your friendly spirit and your forethought for me, but nevertheless you have missed a good judgment. After exalting me, my family, and my deed to a great height, you then cast me down to nothing by advising me to outrage a dead body and by saying that, if I do this, I shall be better spoken of. Such things are more fitting for barbarians to do than for Hellenes, and even with them we find fault for doing so. However that may be, I do not wish in any such manner as this to please either Aeginetans or others who like such things. It is enough for me to please the Spartans by keeping away from unholy deeds and from unholy speech as well. As for Leonidas, whom you bid me avenge, I declare that he has already been greatly avenged, and by the countless lives taken from these men he has been honored, and not he only but also the rest who brought their lives to an end at Thermopylae. As for you, do not come to me again with such a proposal, nor give me such advice. Be thankful, moreover, that you receive no punishment for it now. After hearing this, Lampon went his way. Pausanias made a proclamation that no one should lay hands on the spoil, and he ordered the Helots to collect the things together. They scattered through the camp and found tents furnished with gold and silver, beds overlaid with gold and silver, golden mixing, bowls, cups, and other drinking vessels. They also found sacks laid on wagons, in which there proved to be cauldrons of both gold and silver. From the dead bodies lying there they stripped bracelets, collars, and swords if they were made of gold. As for embroidered clothing, no account was made of it. Then the Helots stole many of the things and sold them to the Aeginetans, but they also delivered up many things, as many as they could not conceal. Thus the great wealth of the Aeginetans first came from this. They bought the gold from the Helots while pretending that it was brass. Then, after they had brought the things together, they set apart a tithe for the god of Delphi. With this was dedicated the offering of the golden tripod, which rests upon the three-headed serpent of bronze and stands close beside the altar. They also set apart a tithe for the god at Olympia, with which they dedicated the offering of a bronze statue of Zeus 10 cubits high, and finally one for the god at the Isthmus, with which a bronze statue of Poseidon 7 cubits high was made. After setting these things apart, they divided the rest. Each man took what he ought to have, including the concubines of the Persians, the gold, the silver, the other things, and the beasts of burden. How much was set apart and given to those who had proved themselves the best men at Plataea is not reported by anyone, though for my part I suppose that gifts were made to them also. Pausanias, however, had 10 of each thing set apart and given to him, women, horses, talents, camels, and likewise of the other things. It is also said that the following happened. Xerxes, in his flight from Hellas, had left the furnishings of his own tent to Mardonius. Pausanias, seeing the furniture of Mardonius adorned with gold and silver and hangings of different colors, ordered the bakers and cooks to prepare a meal as they had been accustomed to do for Mardonius. When they had done as they were commanded, Pausanias saw the gold and silver couches with their luxurious coverings, the gold and silver tables, and the magnificent equipment of the feast. He was astonished at the good things set before him. Then, for sport, he ordered his own servants to prepare a Laconian meal. When this banquet also was served, the difference between the two was great. Pausanias laughed and sent for the commanders of the Hellenes. When they had come together, Pausanias pointed to the preparation of the 2 meals and spoke to them. Hellenes, this is why I assembled you. because I wanted to show you the senselessness of this leader of the Medes. Having such fare as this, he came to us who have such poor fare as you see here, in order to take it away from us. Thus it is said, Pausanias spoke to the commanders of the Hellenes. In later times after these events, however, many of the Plataeans also found chests of gold, silver, and other treasures. Moreover, afterward the following was seen among the dead bodies there, after the flesh had been stripped from the bones, for the Plataeans gathered all the bones together into one place. There was found a skull with no suture, but all of one bone. There was also seen a jawbone, that is, the upper part of the jaw, which had teeth joined together and all of one bone, both the biting teeth and the grinding teeth. The bones were also seen of a man 5 cubits tall. The body of Mardonius, however, had disappeared on the day after the battle. By whom it was taken, I am not able to say with certainty. I have heard the names of many men from various cities who are said to have buried Mardonius, and I know that many received gifts from Artans the son of Mardonius for having done this. Yet who it was who took up and buried the body of Mardonius, I cannot discover for certain. Dionysophanes, an Ephesian, however, is reported with some appearance of reason to have been the man who buried Mardonius. He then was buried in some such manner as this. When the Hellenes had divided the spoil at Plataea, they proceeded to bury their dead, each nation apart by itself. The Spartans made 3 separate burial places for themselves. In one they buried the younger Spartans, among whom were Posidonius, Amorpharitos, Philocyon, and Callicrates. In one of the graves, I say, the younger men were laid. In the second, the rest of the Spartans, and in the third, the Helots. Thus the Spartans buried their dead. The Tegeans buried theirs all together in a place apart from these, and the Athenians buried theirs together, while the Megarians and Phliasians buried those who had been slain by the cavalry. All these burial places had bodies laid in them. But as for the burial places of other states that are to be seen at Plataea, I am informed that they are all mere mounds of earth without any bodies in them. They were raised by the several peoples for the sake of posterity, because they were ashamed of their absence from the fight. Among others, there is one there called the burial place of the Aeginetans, which I hear was raised at the request of the Aeginetans by Cleides the son of Autodicos, a man of Plataea who was their public guest, friend, no less than 10 years after these events.
And there we leave the field of Plataea 1, Mardonius dead, and the vast Persian land army broken on the same day. So Herodotus tells us that the Greek fleet was winning far across the sea. Next time, in part 51, the spoils of that enormous victory, the reckoning with the Greeks who Medized, and the second great battle of the day, at Mycale in Ionia, that set the Greek East on fire. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.